webinar, The Shift, Past, Present, and Future of Autism Advocacy as part of Autism Awareness Month. My name is Evelyn Romero, and I'm honored to be part of this important conversation. The Shift is a free virtual series to engage the neurodiverse community to deep dive into diverse topics, expanding their understanding and to challenge pre-existing beliefs. We're so glad you could join us today for this panel discussion. Beyond the Shift, you can also further your learning through Saunderly, our online learning division. Saunderly has a course on self-advocacy, and we're also offering a discount to the Shift participants. The discount code and link to the course can be found in the chat. Before we begin, I would like to share our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. I want to express my gratitude to the Indigenous people for their ongoing care and advocacy for the land on which we live, work, and enjoy. We further acknowledge the longstanding presence, contributions, and achievements of peoples of African descent to the development of Canada since the arrival of the first named African, Matthew da Costa, in 1604, and all those who arrived previous and subsequent to him. For more information about the lands you occupy, you can visit the following website, native-land.ca. You'll see that in the chat. And a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's session will last approximately 1 hour, and we will have a live Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop your questions into the chat box. If you miss anything, don't worry, the recording will be sent to all registrants. Now let's meet our incredible speakers. I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Kerry Magro. He was non-speaking until 2.5, diagnosed with autism at 4, and didn't speak in complete sentences until 7 years old. Today, Dr. Magro is an award-winning autistic professional speaker, best-selling author, and autism consultant to Netflix's Emmy award-winning series Love on the Spectrum US and the HBO series Mrs. Fletcher. We also have Dr. Stephen Shore with us today. Once recommended for institutionalization and non-speaking until age 4. Today, he's a professor at Adelphi University and NYU Steinhardt, an internationally recognized educator, consultant, and author specializing in autism and neurodiversity. He serves on the boards of several leading autism organizations. Dr. Shore combines personal, practical, and academic experiences to promote fulfilling and productive lives for autistic and otherwise neurodivergent individuals as the rule rather than the exception. And we also have Desmond Lewis Edwards, whose pronouns are they, he, she. He is a disabled intersex actor, artist, musician, and advocate. They made their Broadway debut as Remy in How to Dance in Ohio. Their television work includes a role in Blue Bloods as well. Thank you. I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Kerry Magro.
Well, Evelyn and Geneva Center for Autism, thank you so much for having us for this meaningful conversation, especially on today, which is April 2nd, which is also known to many as World Autism Day, where we get the opportunity to highlight the fact that over 70 million people worldwide have an autism diagnosis. So we are going to pivot to our PowerPoint slides and we will get started for today's presentation. Just, can everyone see my slides okay, just as a housekeeping? Perfect. And I will get that into mode so you guys can see it a little bit better. Wonderful. So I had the wonderful opportunity of being one of the keynote speakers at the Geneva Center for Autism Symposium last year, where we got to do a deep dive into the past, present, and future of autism advocacy for their anniversary. And I'm so excited to have two amazing autism self-advocates with me today as we have larger conversations in our community about not only the history of autism, where we currently stand in our autism community today, but what also the future has in store, not only in the US and Canada, but globally as well. So, objectives of today's panel. We are going to explore the evolution of autism advocacy by examining how personal experiences, societal attitudes, and advocacy efforts have changed over time. Through the diverse lived experiences of our panelists, this conversation aims to highlight key progress, ongoing challenges, and future opportunities in shaping inclusive policies, workplaces, education systems, and public perception, offering meaningful insights for professionals, educators, parents, and self-advocates alike. Often we say in the autism world is that it takes a village, and you all play a huge part in that. highlighting also the importance of representation and authentic voices in driving meaningful change within the autism community. And finally, equipping all of you who have joined us today on World Autism Day with actionable strategies, insights to support inclusion and advocacy efforts in their personal and professional lives. So before we open it up to a few questions that we have for our panelists, before we open it up to any questions that you all have, I just want to go through a quick overview of the past, present, and future. Now, when we first were discussing autism in the 1940s by Leo Kanner in 1943 and Hans Asperger in 1994, there were a wide range of definitions focused mostly on those with high support needs. But as our dear friend, Dr. Stephen Shore, who is a panelist for today's presentation, says, if you met one autistic person, you've met just that one autistic person. You may hear in your community somebody say something on the lines of, well, back in my day, we didn't have any of that autism or ADHD stuff. Yes, we did. It was just not diagnosed and the education wasn't there. Early research also misclassified autism as childhood schizophrenia, leading to harmful treatments such as institutionalization for those in the autism community. In addition to that, the refrigerator mother theory was also prevalent in the mid 20th century, which wrongly blamed cold parenting for autism, especially in North America and Europe. You may hear in the community some misconceptions that bad parenting can cause an autism diagnosis, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The late, great, amazing autism advocate, Steve Silberman, wrote an incredible book. If you ever want to learn more about the history of autism and neurotrads, which became a New York Times bestselling book, where he does a deep dive into the history of autism today. And across the globe, misdiagnoses and stigma around autism have led to a lack of services for autistic individuals in many countries today. As we currently look at the present world that we live in, where we're advocating for autism, there has been a focus on inclusive educational models, not only in the US, but globally as well. Denmark has led the way, for example, in creating inclusive educational models where neurodiverse students are supported in mainstream classrooms with tailored interventions. The UK's special education needs, also known as SEN framework, also supports children with autism, offering personalized education plans and additional resources in schools. You guys, it's so important in our society that we teach the way that our students learn. The Canadian educational system, and we're just so blessed that people like yourselves in Canada with the Geneva Center for Autism paving the way for our community, provides autism-specific support services, including classroom aids, speech therapy, and social skills programs. The list goes on, but we do realize today that inclusive education is here to stay because not only benefits autistic students, but also promotes understanding and acceptance amongst neurotypical students. And when we look at the future of autism advocacy and inclusion, there are a lot of goals that we have, not only from our grassroots efforts, but what we hope to do every single day for our families. Promoting inclusive environments in schools, workplaces, and public places by supporting sensory-friendly offense and neurodiverse hiring practices. Not only the initiatives that Geneva Center for Autism have, but some of the leading organizations in the field of sensory-friendly offense, such as Culture City, which is an amazing nonprofit that has actually made many of their sporting arenas sensory-friendly in the United States, in addition to IVCCES, who do certified autism centers where they train over 80% of their employees on autism and neurodiverse conditions to make more people educated to get our kids engaged with the world around them. Also advocating for policies, especially in the United States. We live in a very interesting current political climate where we need to have larger conversations on making sure that people with disabilities don't fall through the cracks, especially after they age out of school at 21. Joining advocacy groups will be of utmost importance as we realize the need to continue to highlight autism, When I was diagnosed, it was 1 in every 1,000 being diagnosed. And now today in the US, it's 1 in 36. And I believe 1 in 50 in Canada. It might be 1 in 66. I need more coffee and I apologize for that. In addition to that, it will also be important to a lot of nonprofit organizations, 501c3s are really struggling right now, especially as we see a level of inflation, not only in the US, but globally as well. So the importance of giving back and showing your support around these causes, because every little bit helps. And then also just encouraging kindness, empathy, and understanding. On days like today, which is also proclaimed as World Autism Awareness Day, what I like to say is pivoting those conversations towards World Autism Acceptance Day, Understanding, and Celebration Day, as some people with neurodiverse conditions consider their autism an integral part of who they are. So run a show for today. So we'll be doing panelist introductions where you'll get to hear a little bit more about Stephen and Des. And then we'll go into just 4 questions that we have for our panelists before opening it up to any question that any of you have. While we're going along, feel free to write your questions in the comments and let us know who you'd like to answer it amongst myself or the other panelists. So my journey, I have a very personal passion behind this cause. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 4 years old and was completely not speaking till 2.5, and didn't start speaking complete sentences till I was about 7. But thanks to 15 years of occupational, physical, speech, music, and theater therapy, I was able to overcome many of my obstacles, and today am a full-time professionally certified public speaker, traveling the globe and talking about autism, neurodiversity, and inclusion. I received my doctorate in education from New Jersey State University in 2019, where I hope to one day become an adjunct professor to help our students understand more about the special needs community. During that time, I've spoken at over 1,400 events in the past 14 years since getting my accreditation in public speaking, and have had the opportunity to have a nonprofit organization called KFM Making a Difference, where we provide 162 scholarships for autistic students to pursue a post-secondary education. In addition to that, I've taken my 2 laser key focus growing up, becoming the 6th member of the Backstreet Boys and also the next Kobe Bryant. I got a degree in sport management at Seton Hall before pivoting to focus on communication and public speaking. And theater was one of the biggest loves of my life. And I've been in the entertainment world for 13 years now, getting an opportunity to bring a realistic portrayal of autism and other neurodiverse conditions to the screen. I've been one of the shows that I've been so blessed to have the opportunity to work on is Netflix Emmy Award-winning series Love on the Spectrum, which, ironically enough, our season 3 comes out today on World Autism Awareness Day. So I hope you guys will be able to check that out on Netflix. In addition to writing an episode for PBS Kids, Carl the Collector, which focuses on a PBS Kids' first ever autistic main character who is a raccoon who is autistic, who likes to collect things. My latest book, Autistics on Autism, also just came out last week, where we highlight 75 autistic adult stories on what helped them while growing up and pursuing their dreams, where we were happy to see that we were on the Amazon bestseller list. In addition, 100% of the proceeds from our books this book specifically, go back to our scholarship fund to support our many initiatives. And now I'm going to transition to Desmond, who will talk a little bit about their story.
Hi, I am Desmond Lewis Edwards. You can call me Des for short. That's DEZ. My pronouns are they, he, she. Doesn't really matter to me. I am a physically disabled as well as autistic intersex actor, artist, musician, and advocate. I played the role of Remy in How to Dance in Ohio on Broadway, which featured 7 autistic lead actors playing autistic characters, which was a huge first for Broadway. I also did some TV. I was in an episode of Blue Bloods. But yeah, I was diagnosed with autism at age 14 or 15 due to the inaccessibility of, Black people getting diagnoses, growing up, especially growing up as a Black girl. It was really hard for me to get a diagnosis. So yeah, that's about me. Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't have like a fancy degree or anything. I'm just an actor.
Yes, you are amazing. No worries at all. And I'm so glad that you're able to bring your perspective today. And now we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Shore.
All right. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here with you, with Dr. Kerry Magro, and with Desmond Lewis Edwards as well. It's an honor to follow you in the introduction. So very much like Kerry, I was after 18 months of typical development, I was struck with the regressive autism bomb, where I lost functional communication, meltdowns, withdrew from the environment. In a brief, became a very autistic little kid. There was so little known about autism in those days that it took my parents a whole year to find a place for diagnosis. And as we talk about autism past, in those days, a diagnosis of autism was tantamount to getting sent off to an institution. However, fortunately, my parents, like we see ever increasing numbers of parents today around the globe, they advocated on my behalf and convinced the school to take me in about a year. And it was during that year that they implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. And this was at a time when even the concept of early intervention didn't even exist. Really, it was just parents desperately trying to reach their child. And I believe that their breakthrough, even though it was in the past, is still very relevant to the present and the future. And that is when their attempts to imitate me, their attempts to get me to imitate them failed. They flipped it around and imitated me. And once they did that, I became aware of them in my environment, and they were able to move me along to a point where speech began to return at age 4. And I believe the key implications are that, number one, in order to do meaningful and authentic work with an autistic person, you have to meet them where they are. And that's the basis for developing a trusting relationship. And these two things come together, then you can move forward. And that's what we're doing now. And I believe that increasing numbers of people will realize this as we transition from working against autism, you might say, to working with autistic people. As we move from autism awareness, as Kerry mentioned, to autism acceptance. And I'd even like to move the bar even higher and have next year's Autism Day be Autism Appreciation Day. So moving from awareness to acceptance to appreciation, and finally to action, which represents all of the efforts that we're putting into right now, that Desmond, Kerry, and I, and that you, all of you who are watching this, to learn more about autistic people and how we can support autistic individuals. Well, we fast forward to today. So we're in the present. And today I spend my time either teaching or researching into issues related to autism at Adelphi University. You can see my hat here. When I'm not doing that, I'm traveling around the world and occasionally bumping into Kerry in various locations as we go about promoting support and inclusion and belonging for autistic individuals. When I'm not doing that, I'm at home writing books and articles on autism, very much like Kerry. We're twins. We're autism twins. and writing books and articles. And what I see happening in the future is right now, we look at the present, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit. At the present, we say, wow, look at what Desmond did as an autistic person. Look what Kerry did. Isn't it amazing that Temple Grandin did what she did? And so on. And we're kind of wowed by that as a society. I see in the future, we get to a time where it's just expected. And this success and belonging of autistic individuals become the rule rather than the exception. And we will see that when autistic people, or one place we will see that is when we see autistic individuals in media, and instead of, wow, they're autistic, it's more just accepted as part of the diversity of the humanity.
Well said, Stephen. I like that too. Autism twins. I'm gonna have to remember that for our next event together.
All right, let's do it.
But thank you, Des and Stephen, for sharing a little bit about your journeys. And now we have a few set up questions for our esteemed panelists before we open it up to an open Q&A answering all your questions. So the first question I have for our esteemed panelists is, how did you first get involved in autism advocacy, and what misconceptions did you face growing up? And we will start with Des.
Yeah. So when I first got involved in autism advocacy, it wasn't something that like I planned. I was just kind of like thrust into it. I was casted for, How to Do This in Ohio before it was even on Broadway when I was 17 years old. I was in the middle of my senior year of high school, and I was still coming to terms with my autism diagnosis, and it wasn't something that I was necessarily like out about. But it was definitely something that was unexpected, that I didn't really understand. But, coming into a show and having that representation for so many autistic people, it was like, now I have to, and, it was a pleasant surprise. But, now that I've done it, I will never go back, and it's something that I've become really proud of. But a lot of misconceptions that I had growing up was that, it was only for certain people, that advocacy was reserved for certain people. And I was not that person, I had the misconception that it took somebody a lot braver, a lot more well-spoken, somebody, that has so many qualifications. And it was like me as a kid, I didn't really know where my space was in that. But now I'm really proud of what I do. And, I'm happy to be one of the faces of autism advocacy.
I would definitely say you are, Des, and thank you for sharing that rich perspective. Stephen?
Yeah, well, I guess I started from pretty early on in terms of advocacy by first becoming aware of being autistic. And the interesting thing is that my parents used the word autism in the house, just like any other word. So since about age 5.5, when my speech had gotten to a point where I could communicate and also I could understand what was going on around me, I knew I had this thing called autism. We didn't know much about what it was, but it certainly helped explain a lot of situations. However, in the outside world, in school and with doctors, people saw this autistic kid and had very low expectations of me. Well, he's autistic, not going to amount to very much. Oh, isn't it interesting that that he takes apart watches and takes out all the little gears and spins them around and gets them back together again? It was seen more as a kind of a curiosity type thing, rather than my parents, who saw this as a skill and soon provided me all kinds of other devices to take apart. Getting back into school, I spent most of my time sitting in the back of the room. There's a grade school, that is, particularly elementary, sitting in the back of the room, reading books on my favorite subjects, such as astronomy, music, mathematics, well, not mathematics, earthquakes, dinosaurs, volcanoes, space exploration, and others. And I remember one time in the 3rd grade, I had a stack of astronomy books on my desk, also sometimes wondering, isn't there more to school than just reading my favorite books? And a teacher told me that I'd never learned how to do math. Well, that's the past, going on with the theme. The present is that I'm happy to see increasing numbers of educators noting highly focused interests like this and would find a way to teach mathematics through astronomy. There's plenty of math in astronomy. In the future, this will become an expected way of teaching for autistic students, for others who are people who are otherwise neurodivergent, and actually for everybody else as well. Continuing to move along, even I remember in my doctoral program in music, I had asked for some accommodations, and they couldn't believe that I'm autistic. Autistic people don't go to college. They're not ready for college. You don't belong here. Well, we're changing that too. And that's the subject of one of my books that I wrote with a colleague, Pavan John Anthony, College for Students with Disabilities. We do belong. Well, we're getting much better about it. So this all kind of came together, which made me realize that I had the incredible good fortune of having parents who understood me, who accepted me for who I was, at the same time realized that I needed a lot of support if I were to lead a fulfilling and productive life. And I now need to pay, you might say, this good fortune forward to support other autistic individuals so that we all can make fulfilling and productive lives the rule rather than the exception.
Well said, Stephen. Well said. And a lot of people ask me this question as well. And the first way I got involved with autism advocacy was my own initial finding out about my diagnosis. I was in a social skills class playing celebrity disability bingo, and we were learning that like Michael Jordan has ADHD and Magic Johnson has ADHD. And the teacher at the end of it said, all these individuals are special, just like you. So I asked my teacher why I was special, and I talked to my parents after school that day, and they told me I had autism for the first time. And it was so life-changing for so many years of uncertainty. It made me want to become an autism advocate and really just help other individuals. And misconceptions growing up, I mean, everyone just assumed that I would be great at math, I would have a photogenic memory, and that I would call Tom Cruise up when I was 21 and we grab some shots together in Las Vegas and win $88,000 on the blackjack tables. So we now know today that autism is a huge spectrum, but there was a lot of focus on that quote unquote savant syndrome. And today we're having larger conversations, especially when we talk about the future of autism around concepts like profound autism, level 3 autism. As the DSM changes, we're seeing more importance on really emphasizing those with high support needs and realizing that some neurodiverse individuals do some incredible things, but some need 24/7 care. So the next question I have for our esteemed panelists is, in what ways have societal attitudes towards autism changed in recent years? And what advocacy efforts do you find most impactful today? Des?
Yeah, I feel like getting the diagnosis out is incredible, but I feel like we also need to focus on the accessibility of getting a diagnosis, because not everybody is able to get a diagnosis. They're not able to get tested due to, it costs a lot of money. And if you don't have insurance, like, you're asked out. Especially in Black and brown communities, how hard it is to get a diagnosis. And for girls especially, or, people that grow up female, it's so hard to get a diagnosis. And, it's everybody just thinks of stereotypes. Like, I grew up as a little Black girl, and instead of, being called autistic, I was called bossy, or I was called, too grown, So I feel like definitely extending resources to Black and brown communities, as well as, girls as well. I feel like that would definitely be especially helpful. And I feel like advocacy efforts that I find most impactful today are representation, really, which I'm really glad that I was able to, do and How to Dance in Ohio, on Broadway. But I feel like people deserve to see themselves represented. And, I just wanted, in my mind, I just wanted to be somebody that I needed when I was, first figuring out that I was autistic at age 14, even though in my entire life, I was showing that I was autistic. but also, I feel like there needs to be a level of transparency when it comes to diagnosis. I did not find that I actually had level 2 autism until I was 20 years old, until after the run of Haddon's in Ohio, because I was initially diagnosed with Asperger's, which we no longer use. But I met all of the criteria for autism level 2, and they still chose to diagnose with Asperger's. So I went, 6 years of my life without realizing, like, oh, I actually needed more support. But it was downplayed completely. So I feel like there needs to be a lot of transparency with autism diagnosis instead of just, trying to appease somebody or just trying to like level down or water down people's needs. So yeah, that's what I think.
Awesome, Des. And I so appreciate the fact that you mentioned just the Black and Brown communities, because often in our communities, especially where we're based in the United States, Black, Hispanic, and Asian communities are diagnosed 1 year later than their white counterparts. So it's it's really important that we reinforce and have larger conversations on what autism really looks like, which is not Rain Man, it's not Good Doctor, it's a whole tapestry of a rainbow of colors. And I feel like that would get us a long way towards looking 2025 and beyond. Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to like learning how to mask.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy with ABA therapy, applied behavior analysis. Correct. Thank you. And how harmful that is for certain people. But, I feel like people don't understand that, I'm not necessarily against it or for it. I don't really have an opinion on it. I know it's extremely controversial to bring up, but, it's, in Black and Brown communities, we have to learn how to mask. We have to learn, all of these things. Because, like, let's say we're, in front of police and it's like, a big deal. If we don't make eye contact, we're lying. If we're stimming, we're being suspicious, or they might think that we're on drugs or something, So I feel like people don't necessarily understand what it takes as a Black or brown person to, be autistic and learn how to mask,
Yeah, I agree 1000%. Stephen?
All right. Well, what I've seen is, first of all, Des, you bring up so many important points. I can't imagine, I've read about, I've studied, I've talked to many people, and now including you, about the challenges the Black and Brown people have in getting recognized and getting diagnosed and getting supports. I can only imagine the challenges, the significant challenges you face. So what I've seen in terms of changes, as I look at my situation and what I know of others, back when I was diagnosed and going through school, autistic individuals were those who belonged in special education and probably in an institution, because not much could be done with these individuals. Well, now we know more. And we have people like Des, like Kerry, like myself, and many, many other autistic individuals, Bill Peters as well, engaged in international advocacy, national and international advocacy. And autism has now become more of a household word. And we're also seeing a turn away from looking at autism as a series of deficits, disorder, and disability, and more at looking at autism as a set of abilities. So that's why when I think about autism, we can still use ASD. It's a nice set of initials. It has a nice ring to it. But I like to think of it more as autism spectrum difference. And as we move into the future, I see people more focusing on the abilities of autistic individuals. What can autistic individuals do? Where can we contribute to society? And we're seeing that. We can advocate individually to individuals. We engage in group advocacy. Kerry, you mentioned a little bit earlier, Carl the Collector, the first animated series where an autistic individual takes the lead in this 80 series show. It was great working with you on that. I was an advisor, or am an advisor to the show. My job is to make sure that Carl, the raccoon that Kerry mentioned earlier, is authentically autistic. And what I find encouraging is the production team, and they're an example of many other situations that I've seen as well, are authentically and meaningfully include autistic individuals in their work. We're beginning to see this also in research. I'm involved in participatory research, which means that if we're going to study autistic individuals, we'd better include autistic individuals in all aspects of that research, from design to implementation to disseminating the results as equal partners along with everybody else. And these are some examples of advocacy that I'm seeing are very impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off that, Stephen, we have a great advocate who once said, "Nothing about us without us." And I think that's pivotal towards how we look at societal attitudes around autism, where for so long there was such an emphasis on deficit-based learning. And now we realize today that so many people in our community consider their neurodiverse condition an integral role of why they are who they are today. While it is a spectrum and some may not feel that way, especially those who have high support needs, autism has given me the ability to find a full-time career in public speaking in schools and companies and getting to work with the entertainment world. And Des was, ironically enough, I was taking acting classes the other day, and Des was one of our guest speakers who was helping me along that way. So we have people with extreme key interests in some instances who potentially can do some incredible things if we give them the opportunity. So those societal attitudes will, I think, be something we'll see a lot more in the future, and trying to nurture strengths versus just look at the deficits that some may have. So finally, before we open it up to question and answer, this is a great wrap-up question for our esteemed panelists today. So the question is, what changes are still needed to achieve true inclusion and equity in the next decade? Des?
I think there's one more question after this, but
oh yes, just in the spirit of time, just so we could get to everyone's questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, though.
I feel like accessibility to finding getting a diagnosis is definitely crucial, and also accounting for masking. I know there was just a question in the chat, but it kind of reminded me of this. But I feel like testing is like, it's very obvious that it's a test made by neurotypical people for autistic people to answer. And I feel like that's not the best, when it comes to accuracy. I feel like if tests were made by autistic people for autistic people, that would be like so much better. Because it's like, they just ask very open-ended questions, and it's like, as an autistic person, it's like, oh, I only do that sometimes. I don't do that all the time, the very literal thinking aspect of, autism. But also getting a diagnosis in general, having accessibility, not having insurance or having to go through, so much money. And I feel like more acceptance for self-diagnosis, in a sense. I know that's extremely controversial as well, self-diagnosis, but I feel like we wouldn't have the need for self-diagnosis if diagnosis was more accessible. So yeah, just more accessibility for diagnosis, and classes, therapy, intervention.
Absolutely. Well said.
Amazing.
Stephen?
Yeah, it does. Very well said. And now I'm going to riff off something that you said, and that is acceptance of the diagnosis. And that starts with the clinician. What do parents hear when they're in the clinician's office after testing has been done? to see if their child has autism or is autistic. Often it's, well, the results of our assessment suggest that your child's characteristics are consistent with being autistic. There's going to be a lot of challenges in school and so on and so on. Sorry to tell you there's something else. And then you get a little bit of strengths at the end, maybe to help the parents feel better. Now, if we flip that, what if we started with, the results of our assessment, and I'm just making this up. The results of our assessment of Desmond Lewis Edwards suggest that Des has some amazing skills in visual processing, in imitation. And I'm just making this up. I don't know where your strengths are. But
that is true, though. I will say
okay, I'm just making it up. And as a result, Desmond is going to be so successful in school if we find strategies to accentuate these strengths. And here's a few examples of how this can be done. We also noted that Des may have some challenges in, let's just say, social interaction. And that may make it difficult for Des to make friends in school. However, we've been at this for over 50. We've been at this for about 80 years now. And we have a whole storehouse of strategies that we can share with you that will promote Desi's success in school and later on in life. And by the way, all these characteristics line up with what is known as autism. Now, wouldn't that be a much better way to learn about an autism diagnosis for a child, for a parent to learn about their child, and similarly for an autistic person learning about their autism diagnosis. So that's what I see happening in the future, and the future will be here when we see that on a regular and standard basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I would like to give another big shout out to our esteemed panelists. And sorry about a little earlier. I am in the wonderful state of Texas right now, which has a tornado warning. So if my Wi-Fi has been spotting in and out, I thought Des was done, and clearly he wasn't finished yet. So I apologize about that. However, I'm so excited to hear any question that any of you have. So what we're going to be doing is feel free to write your question for whichever of our esteemed panelists in the comments. And then we will be going through to answer as many questions as we can. So thank you all so much for joining us. And any questions?
Okay, so I can help out with this. First of all, I just want to say lots of really great comments in the chat. Thank you for everyone who's been participating and sharing their own personal stories. I'm going to start off with a question from Andy from Vancouver Island. And their question is, can you speak to autistic burnout in autistic adults and new information around autistic burnout and recovery? Not directed at anybody, so whoever can take that question, please.
All right, maybe I'll start. Autistic burnout, I believe, occurs when we expend too much energy in what Des mentioned, masking, pretending to be who we're not. And we all mask, autistic or otherwise. We all mask to some extent. You behave differently at home as you do in school, as you do at work, as you do in the community. And masking isn't inherently bad. However, what is bad is when people feel they're forced to mask at such a high level, as many of us autistics do. So we need to learn, autistic people need to learn more about what masking is, when we're forced to do it. Many of us mask without realizing it until someone enlightens us. Well, this is what you're doing. Oh, so that's why I feel so drained after spending time at a party. It's all this masking. And we need to empower autistic people to be able to make the decision all right, this event is going to require a certain amount of masking. I have to bring the masking up to 67% to be successful. You know what? I don't think it's worth it, so I'm not going to go. Or, yeah, it will be worth it, but I'm only going to stick around for a short time. And so that's just one example of what can lead to autistic burnout.
Great. Yeah, well said, Stephen. I'll just piggyback off that a little bit. I'm currently going through autistic burnout. For the beginning of Autism Acceptance Month, I was in Charlotte on Friday. I'm in Dallas today. I gave 6 hours of talks yesterday at a K through 12 school to K through 4 students, a 2-hour staff development, and then an hour parent talk on teaching the way that our students learn. So a lot of my burnout is I lose accessible skills like communication. I do a lot of selective mutism where I just can't honestly communicate with the world around me at all, even for some basic things. And I think there's an important need to find self-care and meditation practices to help more and more of people in our community. And then also being able to have allies in the community who can help when those burnout situations occur.
Yeah, so there's some people that don't know what masking is. So basically masking is like pretending to be neurotypical or trying to be palatable for neurotypical people as an autistic person. But I just want to point out the fact that not everybody is able to mask. Higher support needs autistic people sometimes can't mask, you know. Anybody who's autistic sometimes cannot mask. It takes a lot of effort to mask, or knowledge to be able to mask, or it's just not accessible for everybody. Not everybody can mask. I definitely went through some autistic burnout at the end of my senior year of high school, and almost did not graduate. That was fun, but I did on time. Thank you. But it's for me, it was just like overstimulation and just like so many things happening at once that led to my burnout. It wasn't necessarily me trying to mask, it was just me getting overstimulated by so many things happening at once. And I definitely feel like overstimulation and just like not having the space to have a meltdown, or just to let all the stress out, really contributes to burnout. So yeah.
Thank you for that. We have a question here from Nina Bregman. A bit of a comment with a question at the end. So she notes, the spectrum relates to support needs, but I struggle with the term low support needs because I feel that folks with any level, including ASD level 1, still require significant support to function and contribute, as does my daughter. Do you agree, or do you feel that ASD level 1 over time may not have extra support needs?
Oh, I got something to say about that. And that is support needs are highly dependent on the environment. And Kerry, Des, and I suspect we do what we can to remain in places of, for lack of better terminology, high functioning, the things what we're good at. So I'm pretty good at being a professor of special education, pretty good at being an airplane passenger, pretty good at speaking at conferences as long as I don't overdo it like Kerry described. And I don't need much support. However, put me into a noisy restaurant or a noisy bar, and this level 1 or even exceeding level 1 may drop down to a level 2 or level 3 due to sensory overload. And I believe these levels describe all of humanity. So, for example, imagine traveling to a foreign country. And let's just take China, for example, because their language is very different than English, and pretty difficult to understand, to read, and to speak, unless you have some familiarity with it. So let's just assume that you don't have any familiarity with Chinese beyond maybe saying hello, which is ni hao. You've gotten off the plane and now you need to get to the conference. You're going to need some support to get there. And that's anybody, autistic or otherwise. So a lot of it depends on the environment. And the more we can stay in environments of where we're comfortable and when we have competence, the better things will be. And also at the same time, I think it's good to stretch our capacities, but not overdo it, to challenge ourselves to do things. And that holds true for everybody, autistic or otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so well said, Stephen. And what I like to add to that is that what I challenge people who are joining us today is when you think of the ASD, don't think of it linear as somebody with low support needs going all the way to high support needs. Think of it more as a color wheel where people may have social and communication challenges. Some might have sensory related challenges, because then we look at the person first and then help focus on what their specific needs are. Now, again, if you're getting accommodations, more likely than not, you're going to have to classify if somebody is level 1 autism, level 2 autism, level 3 autism. However, in your own personal experiences with people on the autism spectrum, kind of think of it as that color wheel, because I definitely agree that the term low support needs can be a little bit misleading at times. So if you think of that color wheel explanation and really just try to focus on the individual, it can be really beneficial towards helping them not only reach developmental milestones, but pursue their dreams, hopefully one day as well.
Yeah, and also piggybacking off of that, I feel like when it comes to figuring out like, oh, who struggles more, it kind of sets us backwards. Yeah. It's more individual. It's not like, oh, a higher support needs person is going to struggle more than somebody, with a low support needs, it really just sets us backwards. And I feel like it just plays into the whole oppression Olympics type thing where people are trying to be more oppressed than others. But really all that does just set everyone backwards. It truly depends on the person and like what they're going through specifically. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Awesome.
Thank you. And that actually segues really well to the next question from Marie, Irma Lawson or Zulan. And her question is, instead of focusing on autistics who can succeed or how autistics can succeed, how do we prioritize autistics who don't fit the typical mold and how to just be well and live well?
I do have something to say about this. So there is a line in my favorite musical, well, not one of my favorite musicals, just a musical called Dear Evan Hansen. And it's, if you don't get around doing some remarkable thing, that doesn't mean that you're worth any less, or something along those lines. If you don't get around to doing some huge, remarkable thing, if you don't, succeed, succeed, whatever that means for, people, it doesn't mean that you're worth any less. Because sometimes survival is just as important as succeeding. And also, succeeding looks different for everybody. What you might be succeeding at might not be something that somebody else, success looks different for everybody. Success might be getting out of bed in the morning. It might be drinking some water. It might be prioritizing some self-care. It doesn't have to mean getting a bunch of money or getting super famous. Sometimes it can be just as little as, getting out of bed in the morning or, making an effort to take a shower or just brush your teeth. That can be success for everybody.
Well said. Well said. I love Dear Evan Hansen too, just as a side note. Great musical. If you guys have had the opportunity to check it out, I'd highly recommend, but that's a story for another day. I think it's a part of what we've talked a little bit about already, but we need to elevate those autistic voices and self-advocates who might not necessarily fit in that quote unquote savant mold, because I still feel like if you don't have a personal connection to the autism community, and I'd just be curious if people would write in the comments and just tell us who's tuning in today and what your personal connection is. If you have a family member who's impacted by autism, if you yourself are a self-advocate, or you're just simply an educator wanting to learn more, I would love to hear a little bit more about your journeys and your stories in the comments, because I think that especially some areas that I really feel like we need to elevate when we talk about autistic voices are non-speaking individuals, AAC users. We need to continue to highlight girls in our community, especially the fact that boys are diagnosed 4 times more often than girls, especially in the United States. And that kind of piggybacks towards many other countries as well. And we also need to redefine the whole thought of, I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, but like independence as interdependence, because I feel like there's some people in the community who really have their own ways of looking at success and what that specifically looks like. So that's kind of how I would answer that question for the time being, but it's a really good question.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. And as Des said, success is different for everyone. And I believe that if the person is happy and satisfied and fulfilled with their life and with what they're doing, whatever that is for that individual, then that's a success.
Yep.
Thank you. The next question is from Haftam Teferi, and it's a question for Professor Stephen. I'm a data scientist who has recently become interested in working on data visualization projects to raise awareness about autism. Do we have sufficient data to conduct research on autism-related issues? And additionally, could you share any publicly available information or databases on the topic?
All right, well, it's great to see a data scientist here working on data visualization. That's great. This is a huge answer that requires a deeper conversation than we can have here. What I suggest is that Haftam, you email me at sshore@adelphi.edu, and then we can have a further conversation. There is data out there. I'm not sure if there's like a clearinghouse that holds all of this data or huge chunks of it, but it is out there, and there's a lot of good research being done in these areas.
And that's actually a great segue. If we could throw back up my slides, because I realized that we're almost right at the 12 o'clock hour. I would just like to really quickly thank all of our esteemed panelists for joining us today. Every single one of you are like sharing about your stories in the comments. It's truly, truly amazing. Keep sharing your story, not only during World Autism Awareness Day, because I think every day should be World Autism Awareness Day, because we all love our work, we love our students, we love our kids, and we should be there to advocate for them every single day, because autism doesn't stop in April. It's 24/7, 365. I consider testimonials the greatest compliment. On your screen there, you should see a QR code. If you would like to leave a nice note or testimonial for one of our panelists or all of us, feel free to scan that QR code with your phone right now. And in addition to that, as Stephen mentioned, for his email, these are the ways that you can stay in contact with us after today's presentation. But I want to just thank, again, our esteemed panelists and Geneva Center. You are one of the true champions globally, I believe. They're really helping pave the way for the future of our autism community. So kudos to you as well. And I just want to give you guys a round of applause too.
Thank you. Well, just in terms of closing remarks, I just want a huge thank you to our presenters, to our speakers today, Des, Dr. Stephen Shore, and Kerry. You've shared your lived experience, your wisdom, and practical strategies for advocacy and inclusion. I think the insights that you've offered are incredibly valuable to families, professionals, to educators. And, you know, for me, what I'm really taking from today is this idea of moving from awareness to acceptance to action. So thank you so much for sharing your time today. Before we go, we do want to hear from everybody who's here. If you found today's webinar valuable, please take a moment to fill out the short survey. Your feedback does help us improve and bring more impactful conversations to our community. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, or click the survey that's going to be in the chat box. And don't forget that you can watch a replay of today's session at your convenience. If you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, share the recording with them. Thank you all for being here and for being an inclusive and understanding world. See you next time. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.